for People Matters and DDI webinar on the topic of Leaders Need More Preparation to Face VUCA Challenge. Isn't it true? This is second webinar of Global Leadership Forecast 2014-15 series, and I am Akanksha from People Matters and would take you through the agenda for today's webinar. We have the privilege of having with us Andrew Warren-Smith, Managing Director, DDI India, with us for this web session. First of all, I would like to give you a brief on today's webinar. The session will be presenting the key findings from this year GLF study, which will help you to find out if your leaders are VUCA capable and what you can do to get them there. The findings are well organized in following format to provide you with the actionable intelligence. What now? So what, and what? Now a little about today's speaker. Andrew is the Managing Director of India and Director of Affiliate Operations for DDI. He has over 15 years experience in providing talent management solutions. He travels the world and engages with HR and organizational leaders in a variety of sectors and markets. The part for today's webinar for helping us make this program possible is DDI, is one of the top 10 management consultancies. DDI's companies transform the way they hire, promote, develop their leaders and workforce. Their clients are of the most successful companies on world. They serve from 42 DDI-owned or closely affiliated offices. We are proud to have Conference Board as a research partner for the GLF Study 2014. We have saved time for you to ask your question at the end of the webinar. For those watching the live webinar, you can submit questions at any time during the presentation through the Q&A. We will try to respond as many questions as time allows. We have a full agenda for the webinar today, so without any further delay, I am going to hand over the webinar microphone to Andrew, who will take the discussion ahead. Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Akanksha. Good morning, everybody. Lovely to be here. Very excited about the time we have this afternoon, or as I would say this afternoon, I'm in Sydney as we speak. So it's the afternoon and the morning for you. But very much looking forward to our discussion today, and we're going to try and make it as interactive as we can. Unfortunately, we don't have the opportunity to open up all the phone lines, so we will, however, be creating the opportunity, as Akanksha mentioned, to take your questions. If you do have some questions, we'd love to hear them, so please use the chat feature on the screens. I will also be conducting 2 polls throughout the session today. So again, just try and get you involved and to make this as interactive as we can. So let's talk briefly about the time that we have together. The agenda, which hopefully you should now see on your screens, we're going to take a very quick look back at the Global Leadership Forecast 2014-2015 survey. I'll tell you a little bit about that for those of you who weren't able to join us in the first webinar series. Then we will look at the outlook. We'll effectively the findings of that. What is the bottom line finding of that report? And then I'm going to switch over to this context of the VUCA and the VUCA world in which we operate today. We'll take a look backwards in terms of what the last decade might have been for us and what our experiences were. And we'll look forward in terms of what we as HR professionals might need to do in our organizations to prepare our leaders more appropriately for this volatile and uncertain environment in which we operate. And then we're going to have a Q&A session at the end. So that is about, we've got about 50 minutes left. I'm going to get through as much of this as we can and open up for some questions with about 10 minutes to go. All going well. So let's get into it then. Briefly, the GLF that we conduct is a survey that we do every 2 years, and this is about the 6th survey that we've done, the largest survey of its kind in the world on leadership specifically. It allows us to do an immense amount of segmentation in terms of gender diversity and cuts by levels, by country. So it's a fantastic platform on which to do research. The number of respondents were quite significant this year. So you'll see that 13,000 odd leaders across the world participated in the survey, 1,500 of which were HR professionals, and about 2,000 odd organizations across many, many countries. So a fantastic pool. We partner a number of organizations, which you can see listed up there. But as Akansha mentioned, the primary research partner was the conference board, and I'll tell you a little bit about what we did with them in a second. In terms of India context, we had a pretty big sample size and a good representation with almost just with 800 odd leaders here, 240 odd HR professionals and 270 organizations. So a really nice cross-section of the Indian economy. I mentioned the conference board. The conference board, in addition to the survey participation in our survey and our research this year, they conduct an annual survey called the CEO's Challenge. And the CEO's Challenge really is a list of the top challenges that CEOs around the world are facing. And in 2014, these were the 4 challenges as rated by CEOs from all across the world. So these were the top 4 global challenges. Having said that, most of these challenges were quite common across emerging and developed markets. So not necessarily a lot of variance in terms of their rankings. But what you see is human capital, of course, is a very, very key issue, and the number 1 issue for most CEOs and organizations today. So the role that you have and the roles that we play as talent professionals is a critical and important role. What we did ask in terms of our global leadership forecast is we asked an additional question this year around how prepared are leaders within organizations to respond to these kinds of challenges. And what you see here is the percentage of leaders who feel confident or prepared to meet the challenges. So you'll see in 3 out of the phases, less than 1/3 of the leaders prepared to take on those challenges. And that really, I think, gives a little bit of an insight into why we have quite significant concern about the way leaders are being developed today. Because if we aren't prepared to meet the needs of the future rather than meet the needs of the past, we as HR professionals are not really helping our organizations to become more effective. So this is a question we wanted to ask. We then looked at that within the context of the Indian market, and you'll see the statistics or the patterns and the trends are quite similar, although the percentages themselves are higher. And that is quite a common feature, for example, of Indian results. We do get quite higher, significantly higher ratings on average across most categories in India. That's just an interesting sort of data point whenever we do research. So trend-wise, the same sort of trend and pattern, although the percentages themselves are slightly higher. So bottom line result from the global forecast, the bottom line really was that we are going nowhere fast. And why do I say that? Well, if we look back at the last 3 GLF surveys since 2009, you'll see that the percentages of leaders who rated the quality of their leadership in their organization as high has really not changed. It's gone up by about 10%, 37 to 40% since 2009. So yes, we made progress, but not very quickly. And if you ask HR how they would rate the quality of their leadership, of leaders in their organizations, it's been pretty flat. 25% of HR professionals would rate the quality of leaders in their organizations as high. So that's, to me, a very question mark, is if we are the people responsible for developing leaders, what is going wrong? Okay? So that's the point I want to make there to support this notion of we're not going very fast in a hurry. Again, you're going to see similar patterns here, although higher statistics or higher percentages, but a similar pattern flatlining both at a leader level and HR professional level. The second I wanted to make here is that when you ask leaders to rate the quality of their development programs, you get about a third again as rating them as high or very high. So the programs that we're putting in place within our organizations are not meeting the mark. They're really not addressing the needs of the leaders and what they expect. And lastly, in terms of preparing leaders' future, if you asked organizations how ready were their leaders to meet the needs of the future, this has dropped from about 18% to 15% globally, and from 32% down to 23% in India. So very similar patterns again, although probably in India's case it's dropped by a bigger percentage. So bottom, we feel things are going nowhere in a hurry. Akansh mentioned at the beginning of the webinar that the format of the GLF survey was broken into 3 segments: the what now, the so what, and the now what. And these effective 3 categories represent, firstly, what now describes the current situation. So data is presented in the research report as the current. This is what's happening now. That's called the what now. We then went into so what. This addresses the consequences of the current situation continuing. So if you didn't address the is what would happen. That's the so what. And the now is really the insight that we're trying to turn that data into an insight where you can take some actionable steps to address the issues, concerns raised in the report. So there's a lot of this information on the ddrworld.com website. You're able to get access to various elements of the research report. If you go online, please download and you will be able to find the data represented in these sort of categories. Given the context of our discussion today, we wanted to talk about VUCA. So here's an example of how this data comes together in this what now, so what, and now what. So the what now, the 25, and this 5 in this particular case is the percentage of leaders who are incapable of dealing with challenges presented in a VUCA type environment. So this is the respondents for the HR professionals, and they're saying in their organization, 25% of their leaders were incapable of dealing with the challenges presented in VUCA, right, in the kind of environment. So that's the now, the what now. The so what is the 3. The first 3 that you see there is organizations that have VUCA-capable leaders are 3 times more likely to have financial success than those organizations that don't have now leaders. And the last 3 is the number of talent management practices that are associated with the high-performing or VUCA-ready organizations. And here's an example of the 3. So you'll see the report is laid out in this sort of format. So here, if you were to compare yourself in terms of your organization to say, are you VUCA ready? Would you have these sorts of practices in place in your organization? So do you, for example, have high quality development plans in place top to bottom in your organization? Are they well audited? Are they well crafted? Do managers follow up on them? Are they used as a mechanism to develop the kind of future leaders that you need? Are you practicing and receiving feedback from managers on key skills? So are managers skilled up to be able to provide feedback? Do individuals know how to act on feedback? Does HR support the individuals and the managers with tools and processes and methodologies and programs, initiatives to support them taking action on feedback that they receive? And lastly, the organizations that are VUCA ready are also very well aware of the current status of leadership talent capability. They know what talent they have, they know gaps they have, and they know where to invest their time and effort. So these were 3 practices that were in place for VUCA-ready organizations. This brings us to the first polling question, or questions, one of which is a polling question. So I'm going to ask you in a second, Akanksha will put up a poll, and I'm going to ask you to respond to the question in black when you receive the first poll. And you're going to be asking or answering is, how prepared are leaders in your organization for the VUCA world? the set you're working with is rated 1 if they're not at all prepared, all the way up to 5 if they're very well prepared. So that's the first thing you're going to second. After that, and take a few minutes to do this, you don't have to do this immediately, but after that, I would like you to list Indian companies, in your opinion, that are performing well in the VUCA world today, and tell us why. But you risk that by the chat feature. So really all I'm asking for is to give us the name of an organization and why you believe they're VUCA ready. Okay? And if you submit that via feature. We'll come back to that in a few minutes. So we'll after I've covered a few more slides. So in the meantime, you can respond to the poll, and I'm going to keep going in terms of the content we're going to cover here today. All right, so let's talk briefly about VUCA. And what is VUCA? I'm sure many people on the call today are familiar with the term VUCA, but for those who are not, VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Really, volatility is about the major change that will be frequent and sudden. We are more likely to frequent and sudden change in this volatile environment in which we work. There are going to be many surprises, no question. We have many surprises, and it'll be very, very, very difficult to predict those surprises. You have a predictable pattern. So things happen in an ordinary way. They may not happen as predictive a pattern as they have in the past. The complexity, we will have much more complexity, much greater complexity, and the alternatives and the solutions will also be far more complex. The solutions will not be equal. So we'll have alternatives, and ultimately that's going to create all sorts of ambiguity for us. So it's confusing, chaotic, it could even be contradictory. And really what it is like in us making some errors of judgment. Sometimes it's misinterpretations of what the data or the market is telling us. So it's likely that we're going to get some things wrong. It's not to say that we're wrong, but effectively what we see is going to be this uncertainty, the variability in the way the market will operate is going to be far more exaggerated than it has in the past. Therefore, to be able to prepare ourselves as HR professionals to support our organization going forward in this context. And we're going to talk a little bit about that this afternoon. So, sorry, this morning, I should keep saying. So if I was to ask you the one from best describe what we've been going through in the past decade, you might say something like you're seeing on the screen now. The Time described this as the decade from hell. The Fast Company talked about this time of crisis or time of chaos. And The Economist talked about many things, including this cover that you see, the great deceleration of the emerging markets. So 1 minute reading around the boom of emerging markets, the second minute you're reading around the issue of deceleration in emerging markets. China's growing, China's slowing, America's collapsing, Europe's collapsing, lots of different things going on at the same time. Organizations like Samsung are actually talking about organizational cultural statements of managing perpetual crisis. So there are these organizations out there today who are creating cultures of being permanently unhappy with being comfortable. They want to feel uncomfortable constantly because that's the world in which they operate. And Samsung, I think, is a good example because if you do recall, in the last year or so, they surpassed Apple to become the largest provider of mobile handsets, and I think today outperform them significantly in terms of the number of handsets that they provide. So many organizations today are thriving and surviving in this uncertain world. And this is the world in which there have been lots of economic storms. There have been lots of actual storms and weather disasters too around the world. But you've seen natural disasters, you've seen economic turmoil, you've seen political unrest in the Middle East, the Arab Spring, you've seen the Ukraine-Russia scenario playing out. You're seeing the European economy taking a lot of strain, and more recently even Germany falling behind, China starting to again with the elections in India, we're starting to see an uprise and a positive spin again. So lots of change, lots of volatility in the world today, and quite unpredictable. And really what we're talking about in terms of the future state, it's going to be this constant change where you can't forecast what's going to happen. It's really going to this world, this VUCA world that we've talked about. But the point, some organizations can thrive and survive, and some do exceptionally well. So what we want to talk about is what do those organizations do well, and what make them and their leaders more effective in times of chaos. Here's a quick slide or a snapshot of the top and bottom 10 performing Indian shares over the last 10 years or so, since 2004 all the way to 2013. And you'll see a volatile pattern. Of course, 2008, which was a disaster for most countries around the world. The global economy went into a complete nosedive. So 2000 was tumultuous. 2009 was a big comeback, and ever since it's been a little bit rocky. But what is interesting, if you just take any one of those years, don't take the exaggerated year, but we take a year like 2010, which is the area that you see on that picture now. And really what we say is the top performing companies return 70% returns, so 21% returns year on year. The bottom 10 in that list lost 27%. So that's about 100% between the top and the bottom. Okay? And the average was about 20% return. So you can see in the same market, same conditions, some organizations are absolutely able to thrive and survive, whereas others aren't. And to the bottom of that slide are the few organizations that would be regarded by people like the Boston Consulting Group as the more adaptive organizations in the world today who are thriving in this world of volatility. So you have, for example, MasterCard, which really is in the IT sector rather than the financial services sector, and they're earning 200-odd% returns if you look back over a number of years, 5 years or so. Apple, fantastic returns. Google, Cognos is a good example for us locally, and perhaps, I don't know this per se, but perhaps even an organization like Maruti Suzuki, who despite some very, very tough economic environments and very, very competitive environments has outperformed its industry players by a factor. So come back then and talk about those questions and those polls. If you could put up the result of the poll just to see what people reflected as the response prepared their leaders on. Okay, so we've got a significant number who have not responded, but in terms of the bigger percentages, some are saying, sort of, it seemed to me when I look at that towards the lower end. At best, we've got a 250 respondents, so that's about 4%. 4% of people are saying they are pretty confident or pretty well prepared. As for the rest, probably average or below in terms of preparedness to take on this world and this volatile world. So I think that probably, again, we come back to the statistics and the research that we've seen, probably quite similar. Have we received any examples of Indian organizations that are, in somebody's opinion, performing well in the industry today? Do we have any responses from that country?
We do have, we shared with everyone. So Raghunath says Cummins is one of the names who he thinks is very good dealing with the current change in our environment, and he said they have very strong on ethics and policies. They have a friendly environment, ready to accept changes, and every 3 years they have a job rotation program, which enhance and encourage people to develop and show their skills. So that's one of the examples.
Yeah, I think that's a great example there. I think what I'm hearing there is that openness to change, flexible systems, structures, and actually moving people around create constant preparedness for change, but the reality of trying something on all the time and always thinking differently. So I think that's an example. And if Cummins is doing that, I think that's I would be backing an organization like that to be very successful in a tumultuous time.
The second one which we received from Vandana Shah, she mentioned Hindustan Unilever and Tata, and third one is GE. So what she said that what's the common amongst all three organizations is that the business model and leadership both are accommodating changes and in flow economy.
Okay. All right. Well, I think those we're just going to touch on those three quickly, but I think that's exactly what we're wanting to see is flexible business model, flexible practices that really are rather more short-term these days than they are longer-term. I'm not suggesting you don't have a longer-term strategy, but you need to be able to flex within this change. Thanks for that, Kancha. All right, so let's look at the details now of what we dived into in terms of the VUCA GLF study around readiness for VUCA. These are the four key areas which we sort of created an overall VUCA index when we measured the leadership readiness. So we asked about people's ability to anticipate and react to the nature and speed change. This is an important factor in being able to determine if people were ready or leaders were ready. Could they act decisively without always having clear direction and certainty? So can you chart a path forward without having clear and unambiguous direction and certainty? Can you navigate through that complexity and chaos and confusion? Are you able to yourself and navigate despite that? And lastly, can you maintain effectiveness despite the constant surprises and lack of predictability? So there's the passion, the energy, there's the own personal motivation to keep moving forward in the confidence that things will improve without personally knowing that. So these are the sort of things that we looked at when measured leadership readiness in the GLF survey. What you see is what was then culminated in the VUCA Vortex. And the VUCA Vortex really is the spiral that we get into if we aren't able to address this rapid change, and if our leaders are not really prepared to take on the challenges that I described. So what we see here, just these issues like the economic turmoils and the political uprisings and the depressions and even the changing global weather patterns, there are certain organizations that perform well. On the right-hand side of that slide, you're seeing some of the data that we talked about initially. The last one I wanted to talk about is the 3.5 times. We've called out the other two, the 25 and the 3 we talked about a little bit earlier. But the 3.5 times is really those organizations who have VUCA-ready leaders are more likely to have a leadership bench. Now that's a critical factor here. We talked earlier at the beginning of the webinar how important leadership bench, having ready future leaders, ready now future leaders was. So if you have your organization leaders who are VUCA ready, leaders who can operate in this ambiguous, volatile, uncertain time, you are half times more likely to have a strong bench of leaders who can take you into the future. So these are characteristics that, again, are very, very important and well worth looking at. When we did the research, we asked HR professionals to report out on their leaders' ability to meet each of the acronyms, the volatility, uncertainty, complexity. And you'll see there on the left-hand side of the Vortex, the percentages as rated by HR of their leaders' readiness. So on average, that would be about, again, 30-odd% would be confident about leaders' ability to address that. Now, at the bottom of that slide, we reference 6 leadership practices mitigate VUCA. I'm going to touch on a broader list of practices, initiative, action. So I'm not going to go into that, but there are a number of practices there that we feel would, and 3 of we've already talked about. But let's get into a little bit of detail as to what HR can do in this volatile world to prepare leaders better or more effectively. For those of you who participated in the webinar a few weeks ago, we covered a few key insights from the GLF report, one of which was the role of the HR participator. I'm going to touch on very briefly today and spend a little bit more time on the other two categories. The three that we're going to talk about in terms of how can HR play a bigger role in this VUCA world. The first is the role of anticipator. The second is in support key organizational-wide capabilities of an adaptive organization. So this is of an organization that is flexible and can adapt. What are the sorts of practices that those organizations implement, and what role can HR play in supporting those? And thirdly, what role can HR play in building an adaptive talent management function? So we'll dive into those, and then I'm going to open it up to some questions. I do have another poll question and another chat question. So the first one is the poll, and the second I'm going to ask, I can put up the polling question, and this is what I rate here. Which of these skills is most critical to address in your organization? These are skills that we feel are very important for the VUCA environment. Leadership skills that are important in the future VUCA environment. So if you could go ahead, take a minute or so to complete the poll, choosing of those. I think I've given you the last option. There's E, if you believe more than one of those is appropriate. Otherwise, please choose A, B, C, or D. Let's see if we can respond this time. Okay, so while doing that, I'm going to give you the next question as well, which is a chat question. So like you did, you submitted the name of an Indian organization is Thrive Time of Volatility. I'm now asking you what organization-wide or talent function specific actions or practices are you implementing to help leaders succeed in the VUCA world? Okay, if there's something, the Cummins example, charter, so these are the sort of examples. Do you have something you're doing specifically in your organization that others could learn from in terms of successful management of the VUCA context? You have a few minutes, we'll come back to those. All right, so touching very briefly on the role of the HR into the future. Historically, we had this context of HR really being a reactor where it was all about policy, procedures, and compliance, and really went to HR in the time of particular HR expertise. Right? We then moved into this of the HR partner, where we were asked to partner with the business. This whole period where and even today, we still use this HR business partner terminology. And that was one of getting closer to the business, embedding ourselves within the business unit, really trying to understand what our customers were requiring, what support on the ground. So we resolved talent issues, and we supported sort of rollout of management initiatives at the local level, either in business units or in local operations. Now, if we were to rate the current state of play in terms of HR professionals reside, we still have about 18% of people who fall into the category of the reactor. Okay, so that's the years model, that's the past. So people are still operating in HR today for performing those sorts of services. We have about 60% of people in the organization today in this band descriptor of HR business partner and performing a very good, providing a very good service within that space. But our proposition here, we need to move beyond that to a third category that we call the anticipator. So if you want to thrive and survive in the VUCA world, you do need, as an HR professional, to be anticipating, trying to understand what that future looks like, and being able to therefore align with talent capabilities of the future with the strategies. Now these are faster being business strategies. Therefore, your talent systems need to be flexible to meet the changing environments and changing direction. We also need to have in talent management architecture, so that things that are integrated, things that work well together, things that are not centralized or decentralized, but that connect well, things that work across multiple geographies, cultures. So into talent management that is both flexible but also consistent. And lastly, the ability to translate trends into opportunities. So what are the sort of trends that we're seeing in the market? Is it about building adaptive cultures, adaptive capabilities? Is it about collaboration? Is it about virtual leadership? Is it about change? What is it about? And being able to convert some of those trends immediately into action. So that's the role of the anticipator, which we believe is a fundamental key to the success of leading in a VUCA world. Now move on to a number of organizational-wide capabilities. But this is where HR again can play a support role in implementation of these. I'm not going to cover all of these in detail. I think we've got a good list of them here, and I'm happy at some point in the future to take any questions, or even maybe in this morning if you've got any questions you'd like me to elaborate on. But I'm going to touch on a few of these. So the first one is set broad organizational targets and goals. So really what you want to be doing here is you are setting with as an HR business partner, if you are working with you do have a seat at that table, at the business table, what I encourage you to do is to have a broader range of objectives, measures, rather than in the range. Don't have a single target that you try, whether it's a KRA that is very linear or very black and white. Perhaps you want to broaden that so that you're allowing some flexibility in your system to recognize the volatility of the environment in which you operate. And it's a little like trying to anticipate where a hurricane or a typhoon or a monsoon is first going to strike. It's with pure precision until very close to event. So this is about having broad measures in place that are going to recognize performance without penalizing people. The second, we'll find early warning signs or predictors and being able to respond rapidly to that. So a little like my example of the hurricane, the typhoon, or the monsoon. If I ask you when the monsoon is likely to hit Mumbai in 2015, some people might say first week of June. Some people say the last week in May. Some people might say it depends. But we probably have a sense of the period or the month, the 4 weeks around which it will start. But if I asked you a lot at the time and somebody said, well, I'll tell you precisely the rains will hit in Mumbai once I know the following facts. And that might be where the rains have started falling somewhere else in the subcontinent. And that might be a predictor of exactly when things will happen in Mumbai. So we identify in our world of talent and HR profession what the predicts of future events to be. And that will help us again to be that anticipator that we've talked about. And you can see, for example, in organizations like Google, they can predict when somebody is part of their organization, probably even before that individual knows that they're going to be departing that organization. They have such good data on people and patterns and trends that their predictive analytics allow them to take, with pretty options, take some decisions on factors of departure. So again, use warning signs in your organization. Very simple, I just encourage you to experiment and take risks. You have to take risks in this environment. Don't start with the big ones. Start with some small ones, some manageable ones, but take risks, experiment, and accept that failure is part of it. You have to sometimes to succeed, but don't fail with ones. Experiment with ones first, and that may, changing some of your selection systems. It may be with the interview process. Change tests if you've got them in there. Try some new tests if you're looking for more accurate insight. Do a pilot case. See whether you're getting any differences in it if you're hiring salespeople. See if any adjustment in your practices or your processes or your tools are giving you a different outcome. Be able to simultaneously, that might sound strange, but it's true. If you're working in a large conglomerate or a multinational event, or in a large conglomerate that has multiple business units that are quite different, I'll choose one. Take Reliance or take ABG. Now you have, in some cases, financial services, telecommunications, construction. You have a number of different business units on very different business cycles. And you need to be able to, talent professional, be providing guidance and direction to people who may be on the opposite end of cycles. Some may be having rapidly shortage of staff. The others may be retreating or going into a decline or standstill. You need to be able to respond very differently to these different needs with the organization. So again, being able to in two directions simultaneously. Make accurate and fast decisions. You in terms of using data, I would strongly encourage you wherever possible to use data. To make decisions sometimes is more important than the accuracy of the decision, so speed over accuracy. So work with 80% difference. You may not know what that last 20% is, whether it's correct or not, but the important making a decision early on, get 80% of the information that you have, follow your instincts, take some risks, particularly in the smaller area. Collaboration is another way of speeding up decision making. So work collaboratively, a group think on it. It does speed up decision making. It shouldn't slow it down, and ultimately it could help you with a better outcome. Also, you want to consider, for example, your physical environments. You may have a physical environment that does not support collaboration. So break down walls and physically change your environment. Encourage knowledge sharing. Encourage the communication, physical movement of people to work together and collaborate. These are the things that have been shown to produce better outcomes. Continuous feedback. You're getting continuous feedback from your customers. You're getting continuous feedback from managers to staff members, from staff members to CEOs. The organizations in the world today are full of data, full of information. We have to be able to act on that. So that requires listening and responsiveness. As a HR professional, help to build and understand where people stand on the listening scale. Are people good listeners, truly listening and hearing what others are saying? Are leaders listening to their people? Are they involving others in generating and contributing to ideas? If you're driving innovation in your organization, you need a leader who is open to ideas and open to others' ideas, is not driving his or her own agenda. So these are the things that you need doing and checking in. If you want a responsive organization that can change and adapt, your leaders need the same. You need to understand whether they're good listeners, whether they're taking action, etc. Innovation. Innovation is the key to success in many organizations. Drive organization. Again, what is the role of the leader in driving innovation in the organization? You need a culture of innovation. Innovation is not just an idea. It's about seeing an idea all the way through to execution. How does the leader drive that? How does the leader stay involved? Excellent learning speed. If you don't move these days, you will be dead. The organizations, the competitive nature of industries in which we all operate is days. You have to be thinking and operating faster than your competitors, and you need to be learning quicker than your competitors. If again talk leaders and what that means for leaders, learning agility is a key contributor, a key early warning signal indicator of leadership potential. If you don't have those who have learning agility or learning potential, they are not over time to be effective leaders. So look for that. Measure learning agility in your leaders of the future. We 15 minutes left. I'm going to spend another 5 minutes just touching on the adaptive talent management capabilities I think are important for you to consider. I'm not going to run these as much of a detail as I did on the previous one, and then we'll come back and close off the polling questions and take any questions that you have. So first, we've got build an agile talent strategy and plan. Very simple. Make sure that your talent strategy is flexible, it's meeting the needs of the organization, and it can flex as and when the actual strategy itself changes. If you've got a talent strategy that is set in place for the next four years, suggest it's too long. You need to adjust that to a much shorter time scale that at least review on more periodic, more regular intervals. So if you do move phase where you've gone from rapid hiring into no hiring, you can flex. But really what I'm suggesting here is have a shorter term view, at least a review mechanism within your talent strategies. Okay. Know where your gaps are. We talked about that a little bit. In terms of pursuit of leadership readiness, really what you'd be thinking about here is for you to have a sustainable leadership development and leaders into your organization, you must have senior involvement. You can conduct things, talent audits. You can complete accurate talent assessments. You should be launching development plans, all these sorts of things, and driving accelerated programs to ready your leaders of the future. So really pursue that notion of developing future leaders. It's the way that you can prepare the organization. Gather and use key talent decisions. Again, this is the Google example here where you've got accurate information, but this is also using things like DDI believes fundamentally in the value of deep dive assessment data when you're making key decisions. So if you're using, wanting to make a big appointment, or your organization is perhaps merging with another or acquiring another, or you're making a shift in a senior manager's role, you want to have accurate objective data on those individuals prior to you making a decision. So whenever you're making key talent decisions, make sure that you gather the appropriate data and you use the insights that are available to you. You don't want to be making mistakes if you make them. Building agile leadership skills, I'll touch on that in a second. Talent must provide competitive edge. If your talent function is not outcompeting that of your competitors, then I suggest that you're losing ground. They will be getting the talent, you won't be. So understand what it is that they're doing, understand what it is that you need to be doing differently, and start to implement that. Your talent programs must be customizable. So if you don't have the wherewithal within your organization to customize and adapt, then I suggest you work with partners who can do that for you. So if you've got talent programs that run every 18 months or last 2 years in your organization, but your strategy changes within that time and you can't stop what you're doing, I suggest that your programs are not customizable enough. So if you were able to work with partners who could meet you as and when you made the changes, it may be a consideration. That's one way of addressing that. And then prioritize people and jobs. Of course, I'm telling you what most of you know. Focus on those key roles and key jobs, particularly in the beginning. And then target, for example, when you're in selection assignments, target adaptive traits. So if you're looking to bring people into your organization who are more prepared and better suited to a VUCA kind of environment, look for adaptability. Seek that out and hire for that, and ensure that you bring those sorts of skills into your organization. And then lastly, build a compelling and sustainable business case. Work as an HR professional, work with your CFOs, work with people who crunch the numbers to understand what the cost of a good hire is versus a bad hire. Work with the organization to build a sustainable program that supports these sorts of issues over the longer term. So I've done lots of talking. The last slide I have here really is around building the agile leadership skills. This is from the research again, and these are the four top skills that when practiced effectively, and this is coming, as I say, out of the survey, when these are practiced effectively, these have the greatest impact on a leader's preparedness in the VUCA environment. So these are the sorts of things: managing and introducing change, building consensus and commitment, inspiring others towards a challenging vision, and leading generations. So let me start. And Akansha, if you could bring up the results of that poll, that would be great.
We're just putting the result for the first question, which is in our screen. You can have a look at there. Okay.
All right, excellent. Thank you. So really what we have, so good response, better response levels. That was great. We've got probably about 26% saying that a number of those factors are most critical to addressing VUCA readiness in the organizations, followed by inspiring us towards a challenging future, and what we seem to have of these skills is most critical has come up as an A. So consensus and commitment was also seen as important. Perhaps the first one was managing, introducing change would also be seen as important. So really a multitude of factors there, followed by inspiring others, and then perhaps managing and introducing change. Okay, thank you, Akansha. And did we get any commentary, any submissions for the second question?
Yeah, so that's a good sign for us as well. So the second one was any best practices which organizations are implementing to help leaders succeed in the VUCA world. Komal Verma said that, coaching leaders to be better people manager and not just focus on the top line is one of the practices which they're implementing. Shipra saying that during her stint in ABD, we have worked on leadership development with a strong focus on action-oriented IDPs. And a strong feedback mechanism development. That was one of the best practices that they have opted for. Kunal says that effective communication, precise target measures, change management, effective development of work, and making people responsible is very important, and they are implementing that within their organization.
Excellent. Again, thank you all for your responses there. I think there are so many good examples that I've seen in India in the last year and a half that, I think the ability to cope with the volatile environment is clearly, as it was in the survey, probably in India a little bit better than most markets. But I think those are great examples, and thank you for contributing to that. So we've got about 5 minutes or so left. Let's open it up for some questions. I'm going to hand over, Akansha, could you see if there are any other questions that have been submitted that the audience would like to get some feedback?
Sure. So, Andrew, there is a very important question we have from R.C. Shamsundar. She's asking that how do you measure leadership readiness? Is it the talent review, the 9-box type data, or more objective assessment driven?
Sorry, so that I heard the talent review assessment, and what was the other one?
Or more objective assessment driven.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the one thing I would do, there are probably a few ways in which you can obviously measure it. One is an assessment if you can, and not everybody. This wouldn't necessarily be open to all your leaders. For example, you may put certainly maybe high potential leaders through assessments, but today assessment centers are much more freely available than they used to. So if that option is available to you, then I think very squarely what you could do there is if you design or put a success in the future within your environment, in other words, describe what success looks like, whether it be by attributes, competencies, personality traits, experiences, knowledge, etc. If you If you could accurately describe that, then an assessment center is going to be a great way for you to get objective perspectives on the individual's ability to operate in a volatile kind of environment. Having said that, also look for certain skill sets or certain attributes, like we talked about, adaptability or change. If people, you can do, change surveys, and you could do, using feedback from within the organization to get a read on others' perceptions, these individuals against some key competencies, and again, some personality instruments that would help you to identify that. The other factor that we introduced in the discussion this afternoon is if these people in leadership roles, really what I think you want to be doing is to look at their potential into their future. If you're going to invest in emerging leaders, young people who can potentially go all the way through in a leadership role, which is a critical within any organization, is you're wanting to look at their potential to, be agile, their potential to handle complexity, their potential to inspire others, etc. So always look at leadership potential, one of which is learning agility, and we talked about that a little earlier. So you could look at when you're selecting people into the organization, certain attributes for people who are already in the organization. You can use assessment centers, you can use 360 tools, personality patterns, and a general feedback from the environment.
Thanks, Indu. I have conveyed the message to Aarti. So in view of the time, we'll take the last question of the webinar, which we have received from one of our participants. They're asking that how to improve decision-making capability.
Yeah. So just to go back to some of the examples, I think decision making, as I said, is made up of a number of things. One is analysis. So it sort of goes back to data gathering. Are you collecting the right information? So are you basing the decision on accurate information? Do you, as a leader, for example, collect the information in a way that so let's use a practical example here. I mentioned listening skills. If you are really open and you truly listen and understand people's points, you are more likely to gather a broad perspective of challenges and issues, and therefore the decisions that you take as a result should be of a higher quality, whether it be around innovation, whether it be around business strategy, or etc. If you require the input of others and you have a very good listening skill set, you're more likely to do that. So decisions to me are, do you gather the information? Are you really using skills to gather the information? Do you then apply and what sort of analytical framework do you apply? That how rigorous do you interrogate the data? Do you challenge and question the data? And then ultimately making the decision itself is about judgment. So what judgment do you apply when you make those decisions? And that judgment is probably a factor of things like experience. What experience do you lean on? Do you have the experience to make the decision? Do you collaborate with others? Do you reach out naturally to people when it may be out of your area of expertise? Or is it something that you, in some personality traits, people are less likely to reach out or even open themselves up to scrutiny, but rather would make a decision themselves than seek input from others. So there are a number of factors in there, listening skills, data gathering skills, collaboration, and judgment. I would suggest a number of factors to consider.
Thank you. So this comes to an end of today's webcast. Thank you so much, Andrew. It was such an insightful presentation which we have seen today, and I'm sure that audience has learned a lot from it. As we've gotten from our first poll that no one from the audience thinks that the leaders in their organization is fully ready for VUCA word, and many of them not sure to rank them between 1 to 5. So that's the real scenario, and there's a long way to go. I'm sure there's so much to take it ahead from the discussion today for the audience as well. And once again, thank you for our today's webinar partner, DI and Conference Course. Finally, our special thanks to Andrew Yu for your time and invaluable information that you've shared with us today, and it was really awesome to share your views on the topic. I would like to thank everybody in the webinar audience for participating in today's session. We'll come back to you with the third webinar of this series, which will be held on 4th December from 3 to 4 p.m. and would request you to please block your calendar for the same. That concludes today's webcast, and have a nice day and weekend ahead. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay. Bye-bye.